I wanted to introduce Irene Gonneau, who is the National Indigenous Systems Pathfinder. Irene's been working on the PATH process since 2021, and I have your profile here, but I don't want to go through it because we're really short on time. And I'm also introducing JoLynn Parenteau, rhymes with Toronto, I got to remember that, from Medicine Hat. And JoLynn and Irene are the PATH team with the National Indigenous Homelessness Council. And so I'll turn it over to them so they can jump right in. Thanks.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's so great to see a full room and standing room only. Oh my goodness, I feel so grateful for everyone to be here today. And so today I'm going to be presenting on the PATH process, an Indigenous community grown journey. This presentation is going to be in two parts. So the first part is I'm going to give a presentation on PATH, get everybody on the same page of what it is and what we're doing in this project. And the second part is going to be our fireside chat, which you see at the front of the room, which is our pilot communities for PATH, and we're going to be asking a series of fire chat questions. So you're going to notice that this is an interactive presentation, meaning on your table. Sorry, people that are standing, we don't have enough for you. But if you're sitting at a table, you'll have 4 paddles in front of you. And throughout this presentation, we'll be asking you to raise a paddle with the appropriate response that you would like to communicate to the group as a whole. So we're going to get started right now. So where are you from? If you're from the north, pop up your white paddle, the east, yellow, central, red. Okay, so lots of people from the north. Wow. Not so much west represented, but that's okay. Any west in the standing crowd? A couple? Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. Oh, I didn't even put international on there, so that's amazing. To begin, get your yellow pole paddle ready right now. If you represent an Indigenous CE or a sub-project, raise your yellow paddle or your hand if you don't have a paddle. Okay. If you represent a designated CE or a sub-project of that, raise your paddle or your hand. Okay. Territorial stream, paddles, a couple people in the house. Rural and remote stream, if you represent that. None from the rural and remote. Government of Canada, I know we've got a couple over here. Thanks for representing. And community members. Community members, amazing. And so just to get an idea here of the level of knowledge in this room, if your knowledge is extensive of PATH, raise your white paddle. If it's new information, raise your yellow. If it's minimal information on PATH, red. Or if you have moderate information on PATH, raise your black paddle. So let me see. Quite a mix. Okay, quite a mix. So I'm going to my job today is to get everybody on the same page before we get to the fireside chat. So hold on to your seats. Here we go. So the PATH process started before 2021, but I came onto the project then, and the real catalyst for PATH was and is reaching home's program directives, that common assessment process, a common and unified assessment process, must be applied across all population groups. And so with this directive in place for quite some time now, in different wording in the past, coast-to-coast narratives said there's inadequate housing stock and supports, high rates of Indigenous homelessness, and a need for a culturally appropriate assessment process within the sector. And so this project was born from those narratives and that context. So Indigenous people from coast to coast to coast have been leading the development of the PATH process, a culturally informed alternative to commonly used mainstream tools in the homelessness sector. I'm just going to call it PATH, but it does stand for something, Personalized Assistance to Housing. And we did that kind of backwards because we came up with the acronym PATH and then fit that in. So I'm going to give you an idea of where we came from, our past, where we are, and where we're going, with a focus on where we are and where we're going in this project. But it's important to understand the roots and where we came from. So I'm going to give you the fastest elevator pitch on PATH you've ever heard. Okay. So PATH started in May 2021, and it really started, what makes PATH different is that The initial development and continued development of PATH is Indigenous-led, and it's also used in an inductive approach. So we didn't know where we were going. We let the community tell us where we were going. We didn't already have an idea of how to create PATH, which was unnamed at that time. We really built it from piece by piece, string of Indigenous knowledge in the community. And so PATH is completely composed of Indigenous knowledge. I am not the expert, I am the worker bee. The community and many, many voices that are sitting in this room today are what make up PATH itself. Now, also in those early days, we really wanted to acknowledge an Indigenous approach to research, an Indigenous way of being, and so we positioned oral knowledge first. We equally valued oral and recorded knowledge, but we made sure that we reached out to community first to really figure out what we needed to do, because we knew that's where the wisdom, that's where what we needed would be found. We also developed a national PATH working group, which is still with us today, and some of our members are sitting up here today. So if you're on the national PATH working group, raise your hand. Or your paddle. Okay, it's got two. Oh, got one back there. Another one. Amazing. So we got a couple national working group members in this room. That group is meant to be accessible, meaning anyone that's Indigenous who works for an Indigenous-led organization within the community can join this group at any time and can attend whenever they are available. So that's also been a huge cornerstone of PATH, is making sure that it belongs to community and that it's super accessible to everyone. So I'm going to give you a really quick overview of PATH. What is PATH and what is not? PATH is community grown. It was never an adaptation or an addition of existing mainstream tool. It's in a process, so I'm not going to use the word assessment or tool. We threw that out. PATH is much more holistic than that. It uses a relational versus a clinical approach. It's trauma-informed, so it doesn't go into a detailed trauma history. It's meant to be strengths-based, so we're trying to move as far away from deficit-based questions or content as possible. It facilitates community-based holistic supports and matching instead of solely focusing on housing, disregarding supports and resources. It's system-focused, meaning it measures barriers and obstacles to housing versus being vulnerability-focused, measuring acuity, disregarding systemic barriers. PATH has a prioritization and decision-making component to it, which is an important undertaking of this project. But that decision-making and prioritization component does not use acuity scores. We tried to get as far away from that as possible. It was an important undertaking, but we didn't want people to walk away with a score like reminiscent of residential schools. And PATH is for everyone, not just for distinct groups. And most importantly, going back to the one that starred relational approach, PATH prioritizes above all else the relationship between the worker and the person experiencing homelessness and values their story, including their housing vision and needs, which is the most important part of PATH. It's how it's done, not what it is. So would you choose, if you could only adopt one of these key elements within your community, so tricky question, which one would you adopt? So you can only choose one. Sorry to tell you that today. Put up your paddle for the one you would choose. If you're white, you'd like to do some measurement on housing barriers and obstacles. Yellow, you'd like to prioritize that relational approach. Red, if you really want to bring that trauma-informed practice to life. And black, if you're looking for strength-based. Okay. Lots of yellows in the crowd, a couple reds, and a few whites. Interesting. Okay, thank you, everyone. So I don't have the time to go into the total content of PATH. If you want to learn more about that, check out our CAEH 2023 presentation. But PATH begins before even talking to someone, sitting down and talking to someone. It starts with understanding who the worker is, because there's two path walkers. There's the worker and the person with living experience. And it's a give and take relationship. So it's important to understand who both of those individuals are, and that's captured in PATH. It's also important for that worker, that disclaimer part, to have that self-reflection and awareness that what you write down matters, as those records can be subpoenaed. And also to remember that there are limits of confidentiality. So to make sure that we get that out in the open right from the beginning, so that When we talk about that checklist, which is over here, the roles and responsibilities of the program, of the worker, and the person with living experience, so that they can make an informed decision if they want to move forward. So it's that honest, no sugarcoating it conversation right from the bat before you even embark on path. What are you getting into? Do you want to take a step forward? And if you do, then that's where the conversations happen. It's not a clipboard, it's not question firing, it's a conversation that doesn't have a linear order. It's about that worker being trained to know the areas to explore and going into them. And we don't want to just have that pathwalker profile. There is a little bit of vulnerability in there. Do you have a mental health issue, a substance use issue, or a disability? But only if it affects you accessing and maintaining housing. Beyond that, we're not a vulnerability, acuity-based process. What we really want to know are what are those barriers and obstacles to accessing and retaining housing? Who are you connected to in the community? And most importantly, what's your vision for housing? Even if I can't deliver on it, what's meaningful to you? And then that worker goes and sits down and does their documentation. And that's really key. The documentation happens immediately after. And that we're having a conversation, not a clipboard question and firing answer meeting or session. And then there is a prioritization piece of path, but I'm not going to be able to get into that today. I'll leave my cards up here after if you ever want me to come into your community and provide more in-depth conversation on that, I can. But just to sum it up, the prioritization framework of PATH is in two pieces. The first is automated. It's based on rules of organization, which stem from the Indigenous knowledge that we gathered in this project. And the second piece is the circle guide, and that's about matching somebody to housing. It's about having that time to stop and reflect on who is the best match for this housing. So if you could wave a magical wand and bring PATH to your community, no barriers, would you choose to use PATH in your community? White, no idea. Heck yeah, is a yellow. Maybe on the fence, or hard no, sorry, is a black. Okay, this is a scary question for me, so I'm so glad that there are so many yellows and if there's any reds, again, get in contact with me. I can always present in your community. It's a part of my job. So PATH Phase 2 Part 1 is where we are at right now. That started in January 2024, and it ends at the end of this fiscal year. So we're on a tight timeline here. We are piloting PATH in 4 communities: Whitehorse, Halifax, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. We also have 2 preparation sites who will be working to tailor PATH, but not necessarily piloting PATH, and we hope to bring them on as pilot sites in the next fiscal year, dependent on funding. Each of those pilot sites are doing a series of things. They are tailoring the PATH, the content of PATH, which is the process itself. They are tailoring the training and tech framework, the knowledge sharing framework, which is more important than PATH, as I said before, because it's how PATH is done. It's the magic of PATH. It's the relational piece of PATH. They're also tailoring an implementation framework and an evaluation framework. And all of their tailoring loops back and informs the national framework. So after they tailor it, there's a feedback loop making sure that PATH, the next version of PATH that goes to a new community, is growing with community. There is a training and tech framework for PATH, and so just to give you a little bit of an idea of how that's going to be, it can be virtual, in person, or a hybrid. It's 2 live class days with an educator, a support facilitator, and a knowledge or an elder or a knowledge keeper. So we have all that support in the classroom. There's pre and post course learning, because really the only way to be able to do PATH in a conversational manner is through familiarity. It's through trying it on and getting used to what is the content of PATH. We all know that anyone on the front line that knows something really well can go in and sit down with somebody and do it in conversation. And in the beginning, maybe we got our training wheels on, but we're just open and honest about that. We also have another piece where each pilot community could identify a supplemental topic that they'd like to train in, so an adjacent topic to PATH itself. But the actual PATH process content, We're going to train in what is PATH, the content, how does that prioritization component work, how to, PATH is meant to be digitalized, so how to navigate PATH within a database for that community. Then there's going to be those other pieces, the how pieces, how to have conversations, how to document, how to talk about limits of confidentiality. What does a genuine use of a strength-based lens mean in practice? And what does the genuine application of trauma-informed practice mean in terms of PATH? And then lastly, and most importantly, there are the cultural outcomes of PATH, which is mostly community defined, but so far in the project, it's about prioritizing the relationship above all else, the give and take principles of a worker and somebody with living experience, and how we actualize that in our time with someone, in our conversations with someone. And the last piece is communities are implementing and evaluating PATH. So between now and the end of March, our pilot communities will be tailoring PATH. They'll be training in the use of PATH, which is their first baby step launch forward in the piloting process. And then we hope to get additional funding beginning in the fiscal year for them to do a full evaluation of the PATH process in their community, so that we can have national data to share with you all at next year's CEH.
Tanchikia wow, everyone. JoLynn Parenteau Dishinakashan. I'm JoLynn Parenteau, the Community Pathfinder on the PATH Project. I'm so pleased to introduce our fireside chat circle with you. Beginning in the east, I have Vivian McDonald representing our Halifax Jabuktuk pilot location from the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center. Next to her is Annika Gregg, on our Thunder Bay preparation site. Annika's with Thunder Bay Indigenous Friendship Center. And with her is Bonnie Crisawati from Lakehead Social Planning Council. Next to her is Betty Adele, National PATH Working Group and our Winnipeg PATH Pilot Lead from End Homelessness Winnipeg. And with her is Jessica Klimnik, our PATH Working Group member. Next to her, we have Sarah Sadler, who's representing our Cowichan preparation site with United Way, British Columbia. Beside her is Kyle Mellish from Luma Native Housing Society, the lead on our Vancouver PATH pilot location. And then we have Jason Charlie with Action Research on Chronic Homelessness Whitehorse, Voices Influencing Change, and the Yukon Social Planning, Yukon Anti-Poverty Coalition, that's right, part of our Whitehorse pilot working group. And with him is Sarah Kroon from Safe at Home Yukon with our Whitehorse pilot location. So I really invite you all to speak from the heart. We have 3 or 4 questions in a few minutes each, so you're welcome to answer any question that speaks to you. Firstly, we'd love to know what drew you to PATH, and when did you decide to adopt PATH within your community? Who will be my brave first sharer?
Who would like to go first? I have the microphone here.
Kyle, welcome. Marcy, Kyle.
I think for us, it was the requirement coming from coordinated access to have a common assessment tool in your systems, realistically. But at the same time, we took a look at the tools that were out there and just did not feel they were appropriate to put in place. And I couldn't bring myself to make the decision to do it. And thankfully, at the same time, there was an initiative to create the PATH, which was a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Betty. What drew you to PATH?
I think for us, because we had already been doing this previously, and we were using the VI SPDAT, but never the way it was supposed to be used. We always did it in a conversational way. So it was nice to do the PATH because it's more authentic instead of trying to change something to make it fit to how we really engage with people in the community.
Anyone? Thank you, Annika.
So we've been following the PATH process since 2021, and we've been really interested in implementing it in our community since then. We've heard from folks experiencing homelessness who are Indigenous and from Indigenous and non-Indigenous service providers that the current tool that we're using right now is not culturally safe, and so we are really keen on implementing PATH, and we appreciate that it takes such a relational approach and that it focuses more so on those systemic barriers rather than personal deficits, and that's something that we really appreciate.
Thanks, Annika. Oh, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I think similar to what everybody else has shared, we just didn't see the beautiful process reflected in a lot of the other options available. I think the Cowichan region has always tried to come up with homegrown solutions, and the ability to really see the language we wanted to have reflected and just the process and the relationship focus, being able to have that a part of this process is, we're really excited to be part of it.
Amazing.
Hello, everybody. Wake you up a bit. What drew me to PATH? Well, I think the moment I started working for Coordinated Access, here with Betty, as soon as I started working with the community, the biggest feedback we ever got was, why are we giving people numbers? Numbers are bad. You know, we shouldn't be giving people a grade on how this is what you deserve. You know, this is your number and this is what you deserve. So I think moving away from that is key for me. And honestly, since the moment I started, Betty was like, here, this is what we're working on. So I didn't even know this work without adopting PATH. So that's me.
Marcy, Jessica. Our next question for the crowd is, what has been your experience tailoring PATH content? So for a few of our communities, Irene and I have come in person, and the rest of the work has been virtual thus far. So we'd love to know what's been your experience having us come into town, tailoring the PATH content. And so we'd love to hear specifically if you've been in person or virtual or a mix. Vivian?
Hi. Yeah, so we've been tailoring the PATH process in person and virtually since I think June, and it's really been a great experience for our community. We have a lot of different departments within our housing team, and it's brought in a lot of our community and staff together in a way that's really meaningful for them, and they can see themselves in the work that they're creating. So not only are we implementing PATH, the PATH process, but we're implementing our own version of PATH that's suitable to Jabuktuk and Halifax and our unique needs that we see within our clients. And then when we get to the knowledge sharing piece, that's kind of when we're able to implement our own success stories and our own unique needs and experiences with our clients into what we're doing with our clients moving forward. So it's good.
Thanks, Jessica.
Okay, I'm loud. Sorry, guys. So I think we were in person. I think I missed our virtual meeting, but I was in the first in-person working group meeting, and I feel like it was a great opportunity for our entire community to come together and work on something cohesively, which was really, really wonderful. I also know that language is super important when we're working on things. And so I think we really, as a community, put an emphasis on changing the language surrounding it. And so I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Kyle?
Yeah, for us, it's been entirely virtual, but I think it's been a great process nonetheless. We burned through it very, very quickly in Vancouver. But I think it's really important that each community feels represented, especially for those of you who don't know Metro Vancouver's 21 municipalities for some reason. So, there's a lot of community representation, which is important throughout our whole system, and tailoring the PATH process really speaks to that, I think.
Mm-hmm. We had the chance to go into Whitehorse and have some time on the land and spend a few days there. I'd love to hear from the Whitehorse folks.
Hi, good morning. So yeah, we in Whitehorse, we're lucky enough to have Irene and JoLynn up for 3 days for an in-person. So we've just begun tailoring our PATH there. It's been a great experience and something we've really needed within our coordinated access to both be on land, but really work on collaborating together. So yeah, so far it's been a wonderful experience, and I just really want to echo to how much language is important and how much we're emphasizing how we do that. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Sarah. Jason?
So far it's been a really good experience, especially having both of you in Whitehorse. I think it was just like tailoring the process to Whitehorse. It sort of reinforces, builds those relationships, and I think that's what we need, in a community, to strengthen those collaboration and, just to keep on working together and, building a better future for our children, our grandchildren, and our future grandchildren. So, yeah.
That's really powerful. Marcy, Jason. So moving forward, how does this group envision PATH impacting your community in the future? And I'd love to know what excites you the most about these impacts. So how do you envision PATH impacting your community in the future?
I guess for us, it's just being more authentic instead of trying to take a colonized tool and trying to use it in a way that it was never intended to be used. So I'm looking forward to that. And Winnipeg has always done something different. We always ask people, who do you want to work with? So instead of, because it always felt like a lottery before, like someone will pick you and you'll work with them. So we take the time to know the whole person. Where did you work with before? Do you want to work with them? And I think it's just really enforcing the team work, so we don't need to be everything to everyone. People have different knowledge, they have different relationships, so we want to keep that going and promote that with people instead of, we'll be everything to you and you don't have to work with anyone else. So it's just being really authentic and clear that we're all in this together.
I was just going to say, speaking on Betty as well, I think it's really, really exciting that we're all coming together, and I've loved getting to know you guys. It's been so wonderful, making new friendships too. So I think what excites me the most is really making new friendships and making new connections. So
Maybe one day we can bring all of our pilot communities together.
So I have Kyle and Vivian.
Thank you. So for us, we're actually using the PATH across everyone, not just the Indigenous system, but also the mainstream system too. So I think that should be quite fascinating to see the impact of that across our systems and just sort of that Indigenous lens and Indigenous approach that we're bringing through our coordinated access system also being carried through with the PATH process as well, which is from that same lens. And so I think, it just provides a great platform generally for us to begin to look into the different priorities that we have in homelessness and how we should respond. How much do you put towards prevention and diversion? How much do you put towards crisis response? Things like that. So there'll be a lot of learning as there is with a new coordinated access system as well, but I think it provides an excellent platform for learning.
Mm-hmm.
So the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, we have the housing department, obviously, which we'll be implementing the PATH tool with, but we're kind of like a service hub, and we really prioritize looking at our clients and our community members like holistically and ensuring that they're meeting all of those quadrants of the medicine wheel when they're trying to like grow and live like a balanced life in a good way. So I think by gathering so much like personal, authentic information through the conversations that the path walkers will have together, that will allow like referrals to other programs. And so like then these people are not just like getting access to housing that suits their needs, like from a cultural standpoint, but they're also being able to access different services other than just housing to hopefully provide all of these wraparound supports and support the client in staying housed once they are already housed. But that personal information that you're getting, like whether somebody's interested in gaining employment, or maybe they want to go back to school. Like, do they need like cultural mentorship? Like, all of these things can come out in the path process, which is so much more than just housing and homelessness. So yeah, it's like a holistic approach rather than just looking at their basic needs that need to be met.
Amazing. We'll hear from Annika and then Sarah.
Thanks. So in Thunder Bay, we're a northern community in Ontario, and our population of folks experiencing homelessness is about 68%, but honestly, that's probably an undercount. So a lot of folks coming through our coordinated access system identify as Indigenous, and we're really envisioning and hoping that path will help to make our system more welcoming and help people just feel more comfortable in accessing services through coordinated access. And there's a lot of excitement and openness and willingness from community partners to implement PATH. And so we're just really grateful to see that community partners are so open to embracing something new and not necessarily like staying stuck in, the ways that we've been doing things in the past. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's been one of the silver linings of PATH, is that it's really created connections in communities as well.
Yeah, I just want to echo as well that in Whitehorse, our community is really excited by what this looks like. So our partners within Coordinated Access are just very eager and open as well to learning. And one of the things I'm most excited about is who is shaping this. So we have our folks with lived experience, we have our elders, who are actually shaping what our questions are looking like as we go along here. And this is really coming as well from an Indigenous-led framework, which I think is something we absolutely need in Whitehorse to be happening. So very excited about that as well.
Amazing. Last question, we have time for 2 responses, is how has PATH fostered collaboration? Sarah's speaking to that a little bit. Or budding relationships within your community. If you're, Bonnie, yeah.
This is really the one I wanted to speak to. So in Thunder Bay, as I represent the designated community entity, as Annika mentioned, we know that in Thunder Bay, most of the people experiencing homelessness are Indigenous. So this really creates a collective impact with Indigenous leaders, Indigenous-led organizations, Indigenous people who are experiencing homelessness, community members, et cetera. And we know in Thunder Bay, and probably all of you do here, know that one organization cannot solve anything really. You need a collective impact. So it is specifically the relationship building within this process that is really exciting to me in Thunder Bay, and to be able to foster the networks around collective impact that will eventually grow. I know in Thunder Bay, as we've been meeting to discuss the planning, there are people within that group that I don't see very often, but now starting to network with them more. So of course that creates more collaborative efforts, more initiatives. I can't say enough about collective impact or this relationship building within the community, and this is a great way to foster this between Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations.
Marcy, Bonnie, one last response at all? Betty has the final word.
I think it was the importance of this complements the work we were doing. When we did coordinated access, it was during COVID, so everything was done on Zoom. We took 2 years, and there was hundreds of people involved in it. And from that came a coordinated access council, which the community, the lived experts, told us who needs to be on that council and what their role is. So this is a really concrete way for the council, who's composed of lived experts, knowledge keepers, elders, service providers, to concretely, okay, this is part 2 of what we're doing. We did coordinated access, now we're just going to move off in a different way doing coordinated access. So this is really solid work, and we've just had great feedback from everyone that, okay, everyone's contributing to this, so it's very solid work to do.
Marcy, Betty, really to everyone, we so appreciate your time in our circle here. So, Walalio, Marcy, Miigwech, Kinanaskomatin, Limlim, thanks everyone. Really appreciate your time. And so I'll pass the talking stick back to Irene. Oh, we're going to wrap. Okay, Marcy, everyone. We'll make sure that we're available. I'll invite our tech team up to swap presentations.
So we just hit.
I think this fella here is going to come up and switch it over. He's the tech guy.
Yeah, that's it.
This one?
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
I'm gonna be nervous, so I'm gonna zoom through it.
Everybody.
You're shaking. Yeah, I'm third. My hands are
I know, I'm like.
I'm nervous. Really? Yeah. Are we getting nervous? I get cold. No, I'm opposite. My hands
I've seen you all over the place. Making announcements, running here and building projects there. Oh, I know. Hi, everyone. We're just going to go into the next session here. And I'm happy to introduce Brantford Native Housing, and along with their executive director, Alma. Alma is an influential advocate for social justice, diversity, and inclusion. And I can tell you firsthand that Alma is a friend, but also somebody who has been a mentor to a lot of the women in our sector. We've had dinners where Alma's really encouraged one of my own staff members, and so I really, really respect and look up to Alma for being a strong leader in this sector. And we also have somebody who I just met, and I'm looking forward to learning more about, Claire. Claire is, from what I hear, a student. Yeah. She's doing her master's in arts and criminology at Wilfrid Laurier. Can't believe I got that name wrong. And in partnership with Brantford Native Housing. So without further ado, Alma and Claire.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Alma Arguello, and I'm not an Indigenous First Nation woman. I'm an Indigene woman. I'm from Mayan Chapian tribe in Honduras. It's not just Mexico where Chiapas are. But I wanted to first acknowledge where is B&H. Brantford is right beside Six Nations, and we sit on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, and we're part of the One Dish with One Spoon treaty between Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people. So that's important to know, I guess. I thought, how do I open this? What do I say? And one of my staff members said, don't put a script, Alma, because then you're gonna stick to the script and then your voice is not gonna come through. And I thought, okay, so here you go. You want my voice? Right. But also I want to, I guess, before I start my presentation, in a couple of slides, it's so refreshing to hear the path and what it could bring and what that means and what would that mean in my community. Right now, I guess we all in agreement that Spadat should go. And I think even the guy who created Spadat didn't even agree with it, but just saying. All right, so let me start here. So who we are. So Brantford Native Housing started in the 80s, and it started out of sheer necessity. There was a huge amount of disproportionate poverty, it's still happening, but folks were not being able to go to the city and actually get housed. So there was these gentlemen who decided to mortgage their own house and buy the first house at Brantford Native Housing. And from there, it rolled. Everything that we do at Brantford Native Housing has come out of sheer necessity and systemic barriers that the Indigenous population, the urban and rural Indigenous population actually do face. So we helped children, not so much. Moms, we have transitional housing for moms. We have a youth house for folks between the ages of 18 to 24. On top of that, we also have women's transitional housing. Again, we'll talk about a little bit more about that. We go from the continuum of second stage housing all the way to potential home ownership. That kind of lately, due to the crisis that we have been enduring right now, it actually has created an issue because what we're doing to our Indigenous population by not actually focusing on financial reconciliation, we are continuing to continue to push for poverty in our Indigenous population and not giving them the opportunity to actually have generational wealth with like home ownership. Okay, so our programming. So I'm really bad at reading stuff out loud, but we've been here for 38 years. We have various programs, but one of the major three programs, I guess, that really builds our agency or who we are. We provide homeless support, outreach support. We also provide transitional housing, like I said, second stage housing, and we have various forms of housing. One of the things that we are missing, and I think that when I was looking at the information in terms of what is sustainable, affordable, supportive housing, what it has been removed from the name from actually supportive housing is actually the supports that go around with housing. For so long, everybody just thinks that because someone is in transitional housing and programs could go there, they could go and live on their own, right? So when we talk about programs in tenant supports here at Brantford Native Housing, we're trying to really look at programming that not just once you're in a house, you're fine. You know, the eviction rate for Indigenous population is really high. And the reason is because you have landlords and you have community members who don't really understand the specific needs that Indigenous populations need and how culture is so important for community as well. So just because you give someone a house, a building, it doesn't mean that someone's home. So part of my work here at B&H is actually do eviction aversion programs as well, right? When I tell my community partners, I teach my tenants how to represent themselves in an LTB. You know, sometimes not good for me, but that is a sense of agency that we also have to support people with. We provide community tenant support services. So we have something that we call the Homeless Outreach Window. And every day we have, what do you think, Beth, about? Come through the window every day from like getting medicines to getting food, from getting tents and sleeping bags. We also have our outreach worker, my fantastic Beth over here, and she goes out in community, goes to the encampments. And I think there's no shocker. Every municipality wants to look nice and pretty, and Brantford is not any different. So some of our Indigenous homeless folks get kicked out of the downtown area. And what's happening is now the beautification of municipalities have trumped the human need, and our community members are being pushed into further in the bush, making it harder and harder to actually allow them to come into the agency and provide services. So now we have to change kind of the approach of outreach model that we have to go to them as well. So this is kind of a little bit, we do cultural program is so important for the tenants because the tenants have kids and the kids need culture, and culture provides community, and community provides sustainability. So you cannot do one without the other. Our numbers. So hold on a minute. I have it written down everywhere. So on the last year, this is our August, July's number. So we have provided 8,573 outreach services to our transitional and outreach clients. Of those services, we have 62% identify as male, 37 identify as female, and only less than 1% identify as other. So what has happened is we have changed kind of our approach in terms of how we self-identify some folks. And what has happened is we have started to see Indigenous non-binary folks identifying at the window. That is something that we have never had captured those numbers in the past. And it just looks like small changes in community and in approaches has actually made it safe for folks to feel comfortable identifying. 25% of those visitors are seeking support to multiple services. So it could be mental health, it could be anything. And we try to really navigate that process with them. B&H witnessed 7 racial clients seeking food, snack provisions. Roughly 86 of all clients are looking for food provisions. So one of the rules that I tell my tenant support worker is if someone has to pay rent and feed their kids, they feed their kids first. We'll figure out the rent later. But that's the whole point of supportive housing. It was supposed to be there to support. But as we are finding, I love reaching home, they fund me. However, it would be nice if the programs that are associated with reaching homes are actually target based on population in the high need or specific population. Because if that was the case, we would be rocking it at B&H. We would have built houses, built supports, and create more ratio for staff. But right now, we have to do what we have. At our reach window, we have seen a high demand for all of our services, but food assistance has been one of the highest in need. Currently, we have 21 households with children in our youth, like this is just for transitional housing. So 29 households with children and or youth are in the wait list for affordable housing. So that's also affordable housing and transitional housing support. And 50% of outreach services go towards supporting children's youth, single women, pregnant women, and households and children. And that's another increase that we have seen also in high population is pregnancies. We have had women in encampments who have been pregnant. We have had seniors who starting to actually start identifying seniors. So that is something that we at B&H have been taking very seriously. So we're trying to advocate through Reaching Home to see if we could open a second stage transitional housing for senior women. That is something that is very important for community. And it's a way to actually provide someone a dignified way to live their house, to live the rest of their days in a dignified way, but also to have good housing for them. At the same time, those are our elders. Those are the aunties that teach our kids. You know, when we make socials, those are the aunties that show up and do the dance or do a little bit of teaching, but we don't have any housing for them, and that is something that absolutely breaks my heart in how the system is treating the elders. B&H permanent house. So this just gives you an idea in terms of, hey, this is how you apply for housing, but that's the funding how you apply for housing. The route in terms of how housing is provided at B&H is just because you're given a house, it does not mean that this is where the end of the line for supports end with you. It actually means that there is more supports that come associated with that, whether it's a rent bank, whether it is a bill bank, whether it is I need help with my child, I need to move, or barrier-free units that we try to retrofit. This is transitional house. So our transitional house, as you can see here, we have, I think that's the youth house. And I'm not going to read them, but I'll just go through some of the houses models that we have. So B&H facilities, here we go. So we have the homeless service, like I said, the marketing housing, the shelter. We do not have first
We don't have a shelter, like we don't have first stage housing, sorry. Transitional housing support, social, affordable, private, and home ownership. Obviously, home ownership will be our goal, as that's something that, like I tell my municipality, it is, if you're going to really put that you are going to do the best to do truth and reconciliation, financial reconciliation for your Indigenous community who are come for Indigenous by Indigenous folks, that needs to happen and it should be a priority. So E-House, you guys could read it, I'll just do the talking. E-House was born out of shared necessity in 2018. There were high levels of youth coming out of shelter and youth coming out of care, and they had nowhere to go. So a lot of the times the Indigenous youth were the trouble ones, so they did not know where to put them. So a grant was created, and we thought we will just decommission a house and figure it out. So that's what we did. We figured it out. We had a house with 6 bedrooms, and we were able to house 6 youth from the ages at that time was from 16 to 24. What ended up happening is you cannot staff a house with limited funds, 24 hours, plus support, mental health support. So we got to the point that we had to decommission the house from ages 16 to 18. So now we just have them from 18 and up due to lack of funding. And which is when I made that decision with the board and consultation with the managers, it was heartbreaking because now we have nowhere to put our 16-year-old. And we're finding that our 16-year-old, 15-year-old, they're getting younger, living in encampments. They're getting, a lot of the times we're starting to see, as you guys all know, you see higher proportion of young men going into the streets, or they're saying, I'm just going to go to jail. Or you have proportion of younger women you're seeing them less in the colder months, which actually freaks me out even more because you know exactly what's happening. Then we have Just a House. Just a House was born out of, again, shared necessity. There was limited support for women and their kids. Most women do not want to go to a shelter system with their children. So we did the transitional housing in where women could stay with their kid. They are 4 units, sorry. And they have 2 bedrooms each with bunk beds. So we give them everything that they need. We have seen very good outcomes with Just a House. It is a wonderful house. It is a sense of community. We're changing the transitional model for this house as well. We have seen an increase in need in our transitional housing. We have wait list. Our housing wait list alone is 8 to 10 years. Our transitional housing wait list is months, like 6 to 8 months. Then we have the family house. This house was, thank you, Reaching Home, was built as 2 units. We did a tiny home project. And these units are for originally one of the biggest systemic issues and barriers is that there's nowhere for men to go with their children. So that is a huge systemic barrier that we are actually experiencing. And also the whole notion that if they were to go to a DV shelter, it's mostly women-centric. And a lot of the times, again, it goes back to, I call it the new way of 60 scoop, in that the children get taken away from a parent that is able to provide but just needs support. So out of that need, the house was born, in where male identify with their children could go into this house up to a year. And it's just 2 houses, that's it, and we have 15 families waiting for that housing. We also have families who actually lose their house. The economy is not the greatest right now, Mr. Trudeau, but so we have a lot of families coming out, either living in their car. So this is where this idea was born. This house opened in 2022, and so far we have 15 people on the wait list. So my housing services, let me find my slide. All right, so housing data. Currently, we have 120 properties. We have over 182 units. Yes, some of them are duplex and quadruplex. So over 269 beds. If you look at the facility of rental breakdown that we have, transitional units are only 3%. That means like we don't have a lot of transitional units actually available for the type of people that we actually need to house. The market rate unit is 20.4%. Seniors market unit, we have a seniors building, an elders building, and be honest, frankly, it is actually a fun building, more so than the youth house. I love it. We, as you can see, most of our house supplies is tied to agreements. And those agreements kind of facilitate and tie your hands in terms of what actually development. When I talk about financial reconciliation, it's not just also to the individual Indigenous person, the financial reconciliation, but also to the shared survival of For Indigenous By Indigenous agencies to actually stay and maintain the supported services that's around. If we know for a fact, when all those agreements come to an end, there is actually a sheer amount of agencies who are actually going to suffer financially because they're not going to be enough. And also the municipalities will agree how many agreements of those houses are good, bad, and for how long. So this is the household generations that we have. If you can see in here, the 66 years is 11 plus is 11.8%. That's where most of our homeless folks who are seniors or who cannot live on their own are having a harder time. By opening, hopefully, seniors transitional house, it would actually allow us to actually provide the services that they need, such as like barrier-free units, ability for them to do their community, medicine, have community elders come PSWs that come in to care them. But right now, we're working on it. If you see also, it's fairly young, in terms of what makes up our housing tenants. So here's a current wait list. So we received, for transitional houses, as you can see, 88 applications. 88 applications for less than 10 units across. It only speaks to the gravity and the fact that because we provide that self of agency and support, we're not bugging people all the time, so it's not an institutionalized model of housing. Units on the wait list, as you can see, the years is 10 years. We will not be able to keep up with the current rate of funding that we have, while also being able to restore some of the units for an aging population or a younger population for that matter. And the demographic of application is 39 years old, which gives you his young family, quote unquote, status. So as you can see also that female applications are high for women and children. So this is a little bit old, but I'm so happy I got the official pick count data, which that means that the representation of Indigenous homeless folks is not 35%, it's actually 52% in Brantford. So with that said, the amount of funding that we would need to sustain, now we have to start looking at social innovation projects that we're able to feed the funding money back into B&H to actually start supporting and be more aggressive on the outreach that we do, what type of outreach we're going to be doing, and how do we support more individuals, and also having municipalities to come forward and support us, both in the county and the city of Brantford. The housing continuum. I always have like an issue with the current housing continuum because this is how CMAC looks at it. And this is when we talk about it, Nietzsche is one of the agencies that has completely say, that's not our housing continuum. It doesn't work like what, but that's what we are forced to kind of pigeonhole in. This is how you apply for funding for CMAC. And yeah, that doesn't happen like this. So our housing continuum is a little bit different. I'm just gonna, it's more cyclical. Obviously, when I said on reserve, just what we have experienced, that we have seen in Brantford, but not everybody coming off reserve is homeless. But everybody coming off reserve need housing. They're leaving the reserve, especially at 6, because of lack of housing. So we're looking at more cyclical in changing kind of that head, because a lot of the times, if you don't have supportive housing support, at any time you could actually end up being homeless. So I really like the Congress of Aboriginals People explanation in terms of what housing should look like and what is the continuum for housing for Indigenous populations. As this is something that, as the path develops, I'm hoping that also we could look at what is contingency and what is continuity for supportive housing for urban and rural Indigenous folks. Okay, so Mohawk Institute, we call it the Mush Hole, is the residential, I guess the Mush Hole history and the Indian Day School history is very vivid in Brantford, in where you see the different types of population that are actually being homeless and the high level of eviction that is happening around that population. For example, folks that attended the Mush Hole, that senior population is one of my hardest population because we don't have housing for them and they don't want to go back to a shelter because that's just a number and re-traumatize themselves. The Indian Day School system population, as you can saw, they're younger. They are in the 40s. They are in like mid-30s. And this population, we need support for actually addiction support counseling, mental health support counseling, and food security. Insecurity. I don't like it called insecurity because people come into my office asking for a snack bag. That's insecurity, not security, but that's just. What is missing from kind of the municipal, provincial, and federal kind of goal is the fact that they should be really investing in the in a Phoebe center. Whether those Phoebe centers in each community either are fully staffed or collaborating, or sorry, municipalities or other non-Indigenous agencies should be collaborating with a Phoebe center in their community. And there's not enough Phoebe centers in where Indigenous community members with housing, friendship centers, or early year centers, at least in my community, actually exist that are properly funded. And the other one is the criminalization of Indigenous homelessness, which led me to start talking to Laura University, Professor Aaron over there, and Claire. I said to them, came knocking on their door, and I said, what do? We have no data. We are being silenced so much by the municipality. We have no data collectively, nationally, or provincially. I want to start collecting this data to actually start telling put the picture together, but also the story that is associated in terms of what the systemic issues of housing that we are experiencing in our community. We don't get money to actually go build something. We don't get money to go fix our current houses. Some of our houses, I had to tear down a building because it has lead paint, asbestos pipes, so lead paint, the pipes were absolutely horrible. There was what's it called, tinder, dust, not dust, what do they call it when, I'm nervous. Anyways, there were wall radiators and we had a huge flood and we couldn't fix it, so we had to tear down the building. Those are 8 units. And I've been looking for money from CMAC and I've been looking for places to actually go get funding to see how we can do this. And they keep telling me, well, your community does not meet the standard. So what does meet the standard? More women dying? Since we collected this data, we started really looking at the data. In the past 8 years, we have had 28 women that have died while waiting for housing. Most of them were femicide. We haven't even started tracking the total amount of men that die while waiting for housing. And we have lost young people in our waiting list waiting for housing. So it is, that's what's missing. This is my takeaway. Your turn.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. As Shane mentioned, my name's Claire. I'm an MA student at Laurier in the Department of Criminology. And as Alma mentioned, I was approached to do this work. Well, Erin was approached to do this work in 2023. I want to acknowledge that I am a white settler and recognize that my whiteness does not just refer to the color of my skin, but to the racial structuring of social realities that perpetuate racialized inequities. Throughout history, most researchers who have studied Indigenous people have been white. Consequently, research has often been embedded within white colonial beliefs, assumptions, and perspectives, with white scholars doing research on Indigenous people rather than with Indigenous people. So given my position and in acknowledging the historical context of research, an integral piece of this work is that it is for Indigenous by Indigenous-led. As such, Brantford Native Housing leads, conceptualizes, analyzes, approves, and disseminates this work at every level using principles of OCAP, ownership, control, access, and possession. So as I said, in 2023, Alma approached my supervisor, Dr. Irene, looking to collaborate on research to be done on the limited programming in Brantford that creates homelessness and criminalization amongst Indigenous people in the city. Danielle and Ty have been instrumental to this work. They've been with me since the beginning. Danielle, who cannot be present today, is the Director of Capital Development and Innovation at BNH, and Ty is a former employee of BNH and a previous MA colleague of mine. So, as I said, they've been with it since the beginning in meetings. I've also been This experience has allowed me to gain perspective on the groundwork that's happening at Indigenous-led organizations. So since the beginning of this work, I've volunteered with BNH and continue to do so. I've sat in on meetings, gone on to outreach with staff, with Beth, into encampments, worked the outreach window. So the BNH community, both staff and service users, have graciously welcomed me, and I'm honored to build community under their leadership and guidance. So through the leadership of BNH, we developed a mostly qualitative survey and conducted the surveys with people who use BNH's services. So the survey touched on themes related to people's housing needs, social service support needs, multi-generational living arrangements, and overall experiences with an Indigenous-led organization. So we were able to connect with a variety of clients that access BNH. 62% of respondents identified as Six Nations, 19% identified as First Nations, 5% identified as Métis, and the remainder identified as other. 63% of respondents noted that they have been impacted by residential schools, whether directly or intergenerationally. Although a high number, it is unsurprising given the impacts of residential school are long-standing within the city. The Mohawk Institute in Brantford, which Alma mentioned, commonly referred to as the mush hole by survivors, was the first residential school to open in Canada in 1828 and was one of the last institutions to close in 1970, so making it the longest operating residential school in Canada. The residential school system was not the only form of colonial violence discussed by respondents. A key finding from the study is that 45% of respondents were impacted by Indian Day School, another school system that aimed to assimilate Indigenous children into Canadian culture by eradicating Indigenous identity. A striking 77% of respondents stated that they have been impacted by Children's Aid Society. So these figures are consistent with national trends that show Indigenous children are disproportionately represented in the child welfare system. The ongoing impacts of intergenerational trauma and colonial violence amongst people accessing Brantford Native housing is substantial. So I want to briefly share with you 3 of our preliminary findings from this survey. First, it was very clear that Indigenous people in Brantford strongly prefer connecting with Indigenous-led services, specifically Brantford Native housing. 47% of respondents indicated that they prefer Brantford Native housing as opposed to other organizations within the city, with 26% of respondents stating that they will only access Brantford Native housing due to negative experiences at other organizations. Several respondents commented specifically on how BNH understands and considers the unique needs of Indigenous people, including cultural needs and the impacts of intergenerational trauma. One response reads, "We feel like people. We are real people. They understand the history of Indigenous people, and the rest of the society, it's, oh, you went to residential school. What else are you going to complain about?" There was a consensus that people feel respected by BNH. A significant finding from the study is that BNH fosters a sense of community for Indigenous individuals across different stages of the housing continuum in the city. Clients feel seen. One stated that they are trying to reverse the damage done at residential schools by seeing us as people. Another significant finding from this work is the need to acknowledge specific nations when delivering services tailored to Indigenous populations. Many respondents noted that when cultural programming is offered by housing support services, it fails to consider individualism. Ultimately, broad, generalized programs are insufficient. Services must be designed to address the unique needs of particular nations. One respondent discussed the exhaustion that comes from constantly having to defend identity. She said, "I need my traditions, I need cultural services. Most things here are Anishinaabe, I need Iroquois, I need Longhouse, not teepee." Additionally, many respondents discussed the desire to learn more about their ways of life, identity and culture, and support with spiritual connection. 27% of respondents identify wanting more program that teaches about specific nations, with 15% of these responses mentioning that they would like language services. So many discussed wanting to strengthen these ties with communities. The last finding I wanted to share with you is the necessity for wraparound services to also be Indigenous-led and to consider Indigenous teachings. Given that most respondents were outreach clients and transitional clients, it is unsurprising that 61% of respondents identified housing as their top priority, whether that be finding an affordable place to live or home ownership. Several participants shared their perspectives on what culturally supportive housing looks like to them. Many discussed wanting to have outdoor space, so connections to Mother Earth are crucial. Also, places that allow for cultural teachings and medicine, so spaces that allow for smudging. When people talked about the kind of housing that they wanted and the wraparound supports, many described Indigenous-led wraparound supports. So a lot of people, one person said, "A lot of people struggle with mental health and generational trauma. We need cultural services that have to do with our medicines, like sage and sweetgrass." Other identified wraparound supports included food services and substance use programs. People describe wanting to access traditional foods and participate in traditional teaching classes. So one participant mentioned wanting to connect further to her identity, and with that came a connection to traditional foods and connection to traditional teaching classes. Additionally, there was an express need for substance use services that are culturally appropriate and meet the needs of individuals rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. We are still undergoing analysis from this work. However, it is already clear from our preliminary assessment that specific Indigenous-led services are crucial to address homelessness and intergenerational trauma within the Indigenous community of Brantford. The findings reveal that many Indigenous people prefer accessing services through Brantford Native housing due to its culturally sensitive approach and understanding of the unique challenges facing Indigenous individuals. Ultimately, this work reinforces the significance of Indigenous sovereignty and social service provision and the necessity of ongoing reconciliation efforts. It offers a path forward for organizations to enhance their services by centering Indigenous voices, recognizing the complexities of colonial trauma, and fostering culturally grounded support systems. Additionally, this project created a mutually respectful, positive working relationship. It provides an example of how research with Indigenous communities and academic institutions can be done using a decolonizing approach. It requires academics and the institutions give up control and power and respect Indigenous sovereignty and ways of knowing. This project is a symbol of allyship, representing a partnership built on respect, equality, and coexistence, with both parties working in harmony towards shared goals. And I bring it to Alma. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, the relationship, how we did this research, I said to Claire, you have to come to the window. Nobody's going to talk to you. So she volunteered the whole months and months and months before as we were doing the survey, and we had to get staff to go through a training video that ethics needed. Yeah, she went to do outreach. So the relationship has been very easy, and I like the fact that Lori has been able to listen to us when we have had issues. Both Claire and Aaron have been open and say, okay, how do you want to do this? What does this follow? And I think I've changed my mind 1,000 times throughout this whole process.
She has.
And throughout it has been very, very, very nice. Even when we did the questions, when we're doing the survey, a lot of the survey wasn't about, like, do you live in a house? Yes. No? Maybe. Where? Other. It was a conversation that actually did happen. So it has been a very nice experience. And I said to her, you need to put the wampum, because frankly, you guys have stayed in your lane and we've stayed in our lane. But we have walked together throughout this process. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think we have 10 minutes. Is that right? Yeah. So we'll open up the floor to questions for the PATH presentation with JoLynn and Irene, and then for BNH as well with Alma and Claire. And I don't think we have a floating mic, so it's a small enough room. Maybe if you ask a question, I'll say it into the mic for the recording, but go ahead.
I'm curious about the PATH process in terms of being a Reaching Home funded community entities. How do you negotiate or navigate that conversation with Reaching Home about making changes to, say, using this for that, or doing this process of coordinated access?
So the question is about how the project and the organization work with Reaching Home in order to carry the voice of community and the specific needs of community with regards to assessment processes and prioritization tools that exist now in the coordinated access system. And so how do we navigate those conversations? And both Irene and I can speak to that, but I'll let Irene go ahead.
So PATH directly works with community. We are funded by Reaching Home, and we're really grateful for the support that HICC provides us. We don't necessarily tell communities how to change their coordinated access systems that they've developed. What we do is we bring PATH in, and then PATH can be tailored by that community. Now, PATH is meant to be digitalized, and so 2 of our pilot communities are HIFIS communities and 2 are non-HIFIS communities. So we'll be digitalizing PATH within HIFIS and within these 2 other non-HIFIS databases. And for the pilot project, that will be using custom surveys, and hopefully in future phases of the project, that will be working with Reaching Home to develop a hard-coded solution so that as more communities want to bring on PATH that are HIFIS communities, we have an integration with HIFIS itself.
Also, to expand, how do you meet the criteria of, say, completing the DNL and its integration into HIFIS? Like, is that a conversation that needs to be ongoing? Because it feels like those are criteria in order to be recipients of that Reaching Home funding.
So those are all like community-based questions. So really the communities are the ones that are taking on PATH itself and then figuring out how it works within their existing systems. And so that's a part of the tailoring process, is looking at what types of prioritization lists they're currently using, how the prioritization piece of PATH works, and then how do we melt those 2 together in a way that fits for the context of that community. So I don't have a specific answer for you, and it's going to look a bit different for each community that brings on PATH.
I'll speak to that a little bit. So I'll speak to that a little bit. It's definitely been an interesting journey and a conversation with Reaching Home, INFC, ESDC, INFC, and now HICC, to collaborate with them and partner with them to understand that the Indigenous community self-determination. We want to develop our own approaches, our own frameworks for how to work with our communities and our people. And this is part of that. This development, this piloting is part of that journey. And I will say that it's been difficult in that the Reaching Home program has seemed to double and triple down on HIFIS, and with approaches like the by names list and different sorts of coordinated access, like all of these federal mandates that aren't specifically Indigenous developed or community led. And so they fly kind of in the face of what we're trying to do. But what I will say is, what I appreciate about the partnership is they've given us a little bit of a lane to start to, develop an understanding of what it means to work from a community-led approach. So we're taking every inch of that lane we can, and we're hoping that the data that comes out of the pilot process and different approaches that we're undertaking will create a really strong argument to say we can do it better for our community, and we have the expertise, we have the knowledge, we have the people, and so we want to take this. So that's the goal, but it is a difficult conversation convincing the giant ship that is the federal government to kind of give us part of the waterway, right? So, yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question for the second presenters. Did you consider including any of the survey questions into your reports and time count? And why or why not? And what, if you completed your joint time count this year, what was your number?
We haven't started it yet. We did fight. I think we got one question in. Like, did you go to Woodland? The Mush Hall. We fought because they wouldn't let us change the survey.
But you have the option for local questions, right?
Yeah, they said no. Yeah. We don't have any, yeah.
Yeah, so you would have had to go through the community entity for that.
Yep, we went through the community, yes.
That's as the designated community entity of Thunder Bay. That's a huge shame. I'm very sorry to hear that that happened.
Thank you.
One of the things we've found a lot of success with the Indigenous homelessness community entities, the IHCs and CABs, is forming a national coalition and a group that collaborates and talks amongst one another. And we can see best practices in Vancouver or at Thunder Bay, and the community works together. And I would really encourage the DC stream that, like you're talking about, to form some sort of a group, a national working group that can,
Liaise, right?
Yeah.
The
And-
group would be to be
Yeah.
liaise with the.
Yeah, community-led.
Yes.
Imagine. Just imagine. Community. Any other questions?
I just wonder if any of the community police were involved in any of these. Are they aware? Are they aware of the PATH process? Are they no?
The community which?
The community policing, like if any of the police people have been involved, if they deal with.
I mean, I think that would be more of a community question. I would imagine if there's law enforcement or emergency services that are at different hubs or tables, there would be some sort of a murmuring in the zeitgeist, but I don't know specifically.
So communities get to decide who they want to bring on to train in the use of PATH. So it really depends on how that coordinated access system is set up. But we do encourage, for as many partners to come on as possible. And also we encourage both the designated and the IH stream to come together as pilot entities if they're separate.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's fantastic work, and I just think that they're an integral piece.
Any other questions?
You have to be an Indigenous-led or Indigenous serving organization or an Indigenous-led CE to get the supports to implement this process?
So for our current pilot locations, we were looking for IH community entities. to pilot PATH, and then we were encouraging that partnership with the designated community entity. But in the future, what PATH looks like when we roll it out on a wider scale is again going to be Indigenous-led and community-defined. And so, but PATH was built for use both in designated and Indigenous community entity, like sub-project organizations, and all. It's built for Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So, but exactly what that looks like, the community still needs to define. We're kind of paving this path as we go, so I can only see 10 feet in front of me. So I wish I could answer more questions, but please do check out our website because as we do pave that path in front of us, that's where we post all the information.
Go ahead, Paul.
Kyle, did you say that you are the designated community as well? Yes. So it is in fact being in place in a designated community? Yes.
Same with Winnipeg. Winnipeg is also a designated community entity as well as the Indigenous community entity.
Thunder Bay, one of our preparation sites, are partnering with their designated community entity. Obviously, Whitehorse is a territorial stream, but we have both an Indigenous organization and a non-Indigenous organization partnered there. Am I missing anywhere? Oh, and Halifax. Halifax is strictly IHCE with the intent of like informing and their designated CE as we go along.
Merci, everyone.
Is that it? Yeah, I guess. Okay, we are done. Thank you for coming.